Hello and thank you for watching. This is STSC back again with LEGO Transformers G1 Override. If Barricade didn't already make it clear, I'll be using the term G1 pretty liberally for this series of builds. The goal isn't to follow the G1 aesthetic to the letter as much as it is to take any character I like and build them in a vaguely unified scale and style. This time I decided to pull a character from the Unicron trilogy and give the Autobots their first female member. Of course, right now she'll kind of stick out like a sore thumb as the only character with a non-Earth alt mode, but considering G1 abandoned regular Earth cars after Season 2, I think she fits the theme just fine. But whether it fits or not, this is easily one of my favorite Transformers alt modes I've ever built. I think this thing just looks amazing. Turning it around so you can take a look at the back, I just think it looks incredible from every angle. There are some small flaws. For example, there is this cutoff behind the cockpit, but that's mostly in service of the robot mode, and really, I don't think it looks that bad. There's also these bits poking out, which are part of the robot mode arms, but personally, I can kind of imagine those as the exhaust pipes. And in the end, I don't really think it tarnishes this alt mode, which just looks super slick. Up front, I've used a pair of wedge slopes from the recent Speed Champions Porsche to create the rounded fenders. Initially, I planned to remove the stickers which I'd applied for the set, but after having them on the build for a while, I've kind of grown to like them. Override is supposed to have some red stripes up there, and while these aren't really the right shape, I think they do add the much needed drop of red for that part of the car, and I think they look pretty nice. In the back, I've tried to streamline Override's spoiler wings into a more typical spoiler shape. I think it looks pretty great, and it reminds me a lot of G1 Hot Rod. For a size comparison, here we have a minifigure. And with her fellow Autobot car, Jazz. Obviously, this scale is kind of nonsense. This isn't a real car, so who knows how big it's supposed to be, but I think they look fine together. The one negative I will say about this car mode is that unfortunately its wheels just don't roll. They're completely stationary because of how they have to attach. It is kind of disappointing for a character like this who's supposed to be a racer, but I don't think it's a big deal. Once again, I just want to stress how happy I am with Override's car mode and its shaping. I just think it looks incredible from every angle. That's all there is to say about car modes. Now it's time to transform. And here we have Override in her robot mode. While her car mode might be my favorite of the two, that's not to say I don't like this mode. In fact, I actually like it a lot. I just like the car mode a little bit more. Focusing on her upper body, I will say that I think her head is a bit of a weak link. The original design has a very distinct head design with these massive ear antennae and a big head crest jewel, and I had to try and shrink and simplify it to fit on this very small build. And unfortunately, this was what I had to settle for, and I think it's just a little bit abstract and awkward looking. For the shoulder, I drew inspiration from G1 Hot Rod in having a fender and wheel for my very tall shoulder pad. Obviously here the wheel is a lot bigger and takes up more of the shoulder, but I think the general idea is still there. Moving down the arm, I tried to color block to make it almost look like she's wearing kind of elbow-high black gloves. On the original toy, the entire arm was black, just with a red bicep, and I think by separating the colors this way, it just looks a little bit more cool. By moving the rear fenders onto her shoulders, I was able to slim down the chest a little bit. However, I did try to maintain a fairly broad, heroic look, because I didn't want to give her the generic thin shoulder look that a lot of fembots use. The legs follow the original design pretty closely. However, I did make one major change. I've put the wheel here at a straight 90-degree angle. Usually it's at this kind of strange angle in this mode because the legs actually sit more flared to create a more dynamic fender on the original toy. And while that is a very interesting looking car, I just think it looks weird in robot mode, and to keep things simple, I decided to go with this slightly blockier vibe. The spoiler ends up mounted on her back, and personally, this is how I like to orient it, where you can't really see it from the front. But of course, it is still on an armature for the transformation and can be raised to be a little bit more visible. But personally, with the size it is and how broad her shoulders are, I just think it looks kind of bad, so I like to keep it down like this, where it's a nice little detail if you turn her around, but from the front, it doesn't really mess around with her silhouette very much. For a size comparison, here we have a minifigure. And here we have Jazz, who she is a fair bit bulkier than and just a little bit taller than, and to me, that feels just right. I've built one accessory for Override, and it's a shrunk down and simplified version of her dual-barreled blaster, which can simply stud into her hand. For articulation, Override's head can look left and right, as well as up and down. At the shoulders, she has a universal joint which allows for forward and backward movement as well as in and out. Unfortunately, it is mounted pretty low in the shoulder, so it can look kind of awkward. The inward and outward movement typically clashes into the chest plate here, so to get around that, there actually is a second outward joint in the shoulder, which allows for even more movement. For the rest of the arm, the elbow is able to bend almost to a full 180 just due to transformation. There is a bicep swivel, a wrist swivel, and a wrist hinge. At the waist, Override has a ball joint which allows for swivel, a arc backwards, and some wiggle left and right. At the hips, she has basic universal joints which allow for forward and backward movement as well as in and out. The part here is pretty fragile and can pop off pretty easily, so when swinging it outward, it's pretty important to make sure it doesn't catch here. Then she actually has double jointed knees. The first joint on the bottom is the kind of actual knee, the one I would usually use, which can get a little over 90 degrees of bend. It also has a swivel, allowing for proper posing. Then there's the one above it, which is kind of mounted in the thigh, which doesn't have a swivel and can get pretty much 90. But when used in unison, the leg can actually curl pretty deep. This build definitely pushes the boundaries of what I can realistically consider a G1 mock, but personally I'm okay with some slight aesthetic deviance, and I think she's a great addition to my other G1 builds. I also have a lot of love for the Unicron trilogy, so I'm never going to apologize for building a character from one of those series. But that's all I have to say for now, so I'll see you next time.